then the floor is yours. Okay, great. Okay, dear friends, dear colleagues, I'm really happy and privileged today to announce the lecture of our esteemed friend and colleague, Dr. Don Giovanni Ercolani. He is a renowned scholar in the field of military anthropology. He used to be with Italian armed forces. He participated in a number of peacekeeping operations worldwide under the auspices of the United Nations. He received several PhDs from top European universities. His writing and lecturing extremely vigorously, and he's very prolific writer and lecturer. And I'm extremely grateful to Don Giovanni. And you know, Don Giovanni is not just opera, Mozart's opera. In Spain, once you get a PhD, that PhD diploma, you are addressed as Don, not sure about female. What do they use?
Donna, Donna.
Yeah, great. So great addition. So Don Giovanni, the floor is yours. And today's lecture is going to be dealing with NATO and the evolution of security concept, the anthropological approach. And this topic, it fits perfectly into our conflict management and mediation program, but also our more recent masters in social data analysis, and into our PhD, because our PhD program in sociology focuses on big structures and long processes and conflicts that arise in the course of this large-scale dynamics. So we are extremely fortunate to have Don Giovanni today and to begin this mini series of lectures. Don Giovanni, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Pablo, thank you so much. Indeed, as you mentioned in my presentation, I got a military career and academic career. So basically, all this experience, they influenced my perception of conflict and of security, because I've been basically dealing with this subject at a different level, not just academically, but even if I remember when I worked for NATO 4 years in Turkey, 1992-1996, we were dealing with the Bosnia War. Back in Italy, working for the Ministry of Defense, I was working for the Italian military general staff in the logistic office. So you get a different perception, okay? And when I did my second PhD, I was involved with a military team, Italian military team in Lebanon, in UNIFIL, but I will talk about this tomorrow. Basically, when I teach or I present my ideas, I use two pillars. And basically, these are the two pillars of my research. The first one is when we are dealing with this security issue, we are touching something is political. And the politics is constructed on narrative or a theory. So always I'm a little bit skeptical, and I say a theory is always for someone and for some purpose. So we have to be very careful when we're dealing with theory, or where they come from and who's gaining power through the theory. The second one, and this is more related with what I'm doing, is not basically more a military anthropology, it's an anthropology of security, is that, well, the threat man, this is gears, is guided predominantly by cultural, rhetoric, than the genetic templates. So basically, this is what I'm interested. My presentation today, okay, my seminar, let's call it seminar, is divided into meeting. The first one is the one of today, and the second one will be about the fieldwork experience of an anthropologist, culture, identity, myth, symbols, ritual, and emotion, and this will take place tomorrow afternoon. So let's start with the first one. The first one of my presentation is about the NATO evolution of security concept. The presentation is divided in three parts, basically. The first one, I talk about NATO during the Cold War, NATO security concept after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and third, more specifically, I concentrate my efforts and my presentation on crisis management operation and CIMIC operation. So, basically, this presentation wants to show the evolution of NATO security discourse and vision and the alliance adoption of a liquid security action, what I call, this is my basic invention, crisis management and CIMIC operation. And it wants to demonstrate that the concept of security is a myth and that the fabrication of a security reality knowledge is subjective. To explain how the myth of security is fabricated through the formulation of the security dilemma and the securitization process, and the danger of the security paradox. And finally, to demonstrate how the anthropological approach used in the CIMIC operation can produce reliable knowledge, which I call legitimate security knowledge. I hope people can follow me because the language I'm using come from security studies. My first PhD is on international relations security studies. My second PhD is on social anthropology. Basically, I'm merging different languages and different concepts in my presentation. So here, basically, an idea of how I organize my presentation. So the first methodological consideration is that security, when you start reading about what security is, basically, this is a big question, is we have a different author here, is a profoundly political, is an underdeveloped concept, is an ambiguous symbol, is an essential contested concept, is a derivative concept, is a symbol. And before starting basically the main body of my presentation, there are some important conceptual concepts which we have to talk about, and I want to present. The first one is about security is a myth. The second one is the security dilemma and the idea of the security paradox. The third one is securitization process. The fourth one, what I mean for legitimate security knowledge, crisis management, and civil military cooperation. And after always ask to my student to come up with this epistemological and ontological question. First of all, what is reality and what is reliable knowledge? And after the big question, what I call the security methodological question, is what is security? What is being security? Which is the referent object of security? What is being security against? Who is the enemy, basically? The existential threat. Who provides security? The military forces, a private security company, I don't know, a security company, basically, okay, or an insurance company too, and what methods can be undertaken to provide it, a war, a military infiltration, so on and so on. So let's start with defining all these concepts. The first one, security is a myth. In language, and it's a system of communication. At the language level, security has one meaning. It's derivative from Latin, and the meaning is without anxiety. In my case, yeah, because I talk about NATO, a myth meta-language level is the reality of the real knowledge produced by NATO. NATO, in this case, is seen as a power, knowledge, security structure which produce a security myth, basically a meaning of what is security and what is insecurity. The five sectors of security, these are more important. It's just a different critical approach. It's coming from the Copenhagen school, and I come from this approach. When we talk about security, according to Busan, and the Copenhagen school is followed by the military sector, the economic sector, the political sector, the environmental sector, and the societal sector. I am more interested in the fifth one, the societal sector, because it's dealing with identity. Basically, this is the work of myself as anthropology of security, basically focusing on this sector of societal security or insecurity. What is a security dilemma? A security dilemma refers to a situation where two or more states are drawn into conflict, possibly even war, over security concern, even though none of the states actually desire conflict. The security dilemma occurs when two or more states feel insecure each other in relation to other states. None of the states involved want relation to deteriorate, but as each state acts militarily or diplomatically to make itself more secure, the other state interpret, its proper interpretation, its action as threatening. An ironic circle of unintended provocation emerge, resulting in an escalation of the conflict, which may be eventually led to open warfare. This is what is called the security paradox. The security dilemma is a complex relationship of both psychological and material dimension, and is all based on the dilemma of interpretation and the dilemma of response. And as I said, the big problem is the security paradox. Third concept, the most important one, which I always use, the process of securitization. The process of securitization is what in language theory is called a speech act. Security is the move that takes politics behind the established rules of the game and frame the issue either as a special kind of politics or above politics. Basically, in theory, any public issue can move from non-politicized to politicized to securitized. And meaning, basically, when an issue has been securitized, meaning the issue is presented as an existential threat requiring emergency measure and justify action outside the normal bounds of political procedure. Legit security knowledge, this is what we want to discover, we want to produce, is security knowledge which one can profess as a security expert with a degree of seriousness and without being labeled as an idealist or a fool. When we talk about NATO, crisis management is one of NATO's fundamental security tasks. It can involve military and non-military measures to address the full spectrum of crises before and during and
Лекція,
after.
а потім вчена рада, а потім...
It's okay. Can you
Ага.
follow me? Okay. NATO crisis management deals
А
with
потім
a range of
Інститут
crises
соціології,
in a
акредитація,
crisis
тому побуду на
complex
вченій раді
security
повернути.
environment,
Доведеться.
employing an appropriate mix of political and military tools to help manage emerging crises which could pose a threat to the security of the alliance territory and population. And this crisis management, a crisis can be politically, military, or humanitarian, and can also arise from a natural disaster or as a consequence of technological disruption. The last point is the definition of civil military cooperation, which is a military label used to describe those occasions that see elements of armed forces engaging and even collaborating with civilian entities. Basically, the military operation is a complex piece of part of stability operation. This we'll see more in detail when we talk about that. So this is basically how the mind map of my presentation. Let's talk to the evolution of NATO security dilemma and NATO security discourse. Here I quote Ludwig Wittgenstein, the limits of my language mean the limits of my word. Basically, this is what NATO did. He moved from an orthodox dimension of security to a liquid dimension of security, adapting its language. The first one is, this is how I explain the Cold War period and the post-Cold War period. Cold War time, and after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and with the merge of the Bosnian War and everything, NATO changed its perception and its meaning, basically. So let's see the Cold War period, what I call orthodox securitization. Here, basically, the idea of the enemy was the Russian Soviet Union. Here, I can explain you here. So this was, okay, the security dilemma is basically seen as a war conflict between two or more states. Security is the absence of external military threat, the study and the use of threat and control of military force. The state is the only recognized actor in the international arena and the reference object of security. Anarchy is the reality of the international system. The struggle, war, among countries for power, military power. Insecurity is military insecurity, and geopolitical, spatial, and temporal dimension is the Cold War period. We know that NATO, until that moment, was on a defensive position, was waiting for the attack from the enemy, so was not entering in the other territory, was not an expeditionary mission structure. Okay. Here, for example, just to give you an idea, this is the famous Article 5 of the NATO agreement, and it said that the parties agreed that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America should be considered an attack against them all. So basically, NATO was waiting for an attack, and all the system of its military apparatus was on a defensive side. And I worked 2 years in a tank battalion, basically bordering Austria and former Yugoslavia, waiting for an attack from Soviet Union forces or Warsaw Pact forces. After 1989, we have what emerged as what I call a liquid security securitization period. Here, the security and the source of insecurity is different. It's not a military anymore, it's a different one. And here, how I develop my idea based on a different kind of readings. The first one is the concept of new wars and old wars developed by Mary Keldor. Okay. The other one is war amongst people, which basically was developed by former General Rupert Smith, who was involved in the Bosnian War. And after a very interesting point is a large group identity conflict, an idea developed by Remik Volkan, an expert on ethnic conflict. And after is the idea of hybrid conflict, which are a combination of symmetric and asymmetric war in which intervening forces conduct traditionally operation against enemy. This is defined by McEwen. I hope you can follow me and you understand what I'm saying. So basically the liquid
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So how is characterized this liquid dimension of security? Okay, the security dilemma in this case is a liquid threats, liquid security dilemma. Liquid, you can talk about Bauman, so you can understand what I'm saying. Reality and reliable knowledge are not only the product of the state as the only power knowledge structure. So even if insurance company, they produce their insecurity idea and insecurity concept. Okay, security is not only represented by military solution. The reference object of security is not only the state. The source of insecurity is not only an external armed enemy. The state armed forces do not have the monopoly on security action, and the security methods are not only represented by military action. So, I hope this is clear. So, what's happened after the collapse of the Berlin Wall? We have a different moment. The most important one was which happened in April 1999, when there was the adoption, after 50 years of NATO, of the new NATO strategic concept. There, for the first time, there are two articles, Article 20 and Article 24, referring to terrorism, enemy, and interest. Okay, and after there was a declaration of former President Bush, he said NATO is in transition from a static force to an expeditionary force. This is a very, very important point. And the last one, because I wrote a PhD thesis about the concept of NATO energy security, which is basically, well, you can look at around the literature around how NATO started working for energy security and basically supporting some Lloyds and so and so. There was another NATO meeting, Riga, and the very important one happened the year 2009, because there was, in the year 2008, Lloyds invited the Secretary General of NATO for a meeting. There was a dinner, and basically, for the first time, Lloyds, who is the biggest insurance company in the world, said to the NATO people, hey, we have to work on the same problem. And after was the NATO strategic concept of the year 2010. One thing which is important is really this map. NATO started developing idea, not anymore, not at this moment, okay, of conflict narrative, but defining some area around the globe and mentioning them as a multiple stress zone. If you see the origin of the insecurity, this has nothing basically to do with a military attack. So the origin, the source of the stress is water stress, demographic stress, crop decline, hunger, coastal risk, and recent history of conflict. So you see that's the idea of what is an insecurity or existential threat is not anymore a military attack. So basically, we're talking about what I define as liquid security threat and vulnerability. This map was presented by Lieutenant General Soligan during a conference in Izmir in, I think it was 2009 or 2010 when I met him. So what is, so you see this, so now you see how not only the NATO change approach, it's just the people working for the NATO security idea is enlarging their perception of what is insecurity is. And they have different implications. This is the first one is called a security implication, is rethinking Article 5. And after, okay, you can see talking about partnership, changes in military operation, expand opportunity to shape, influence idea, values, and events. This is very interesting. Shape and influence idea, value, and events. The middle implication, okay, was to adapt to the demands of hybrid threat, adapt force structure, doctrine to train other nations' security forces, adapt to command, control, and organizational structure, and, but this is the most important, win the battle of narrative. So you see, and I go back to this Wittgenstein, the limits of the language are the limits of the world, but at the same time, NATO need to produce a new narrative. So when you look at the NATO strategic concept developed and produced in the year 2010, there's one point which is very important for me, and is the idea of the crisis management. NATO will actively employ an appropriate mix of those political and military tools to help manage developing crises that have the potential to affect alliance security. So basically, this is what I define as a liquid security action. Here, NATO security dilemma, the risk of. As I wrote in various papers, NATO moved and adopted this language of Lloyd's, of insurance company around the world, is the idea of risk. So NATO moved from an idea that the origin, the source of existential threat is represented by a defined enemy, let's say the old Soviet Union soldier, to the idea of the security of ... And this is very interesting because how we define the risk, who define the risk. So we need an expert to define the risk which can be produced in some region around the world and affect the interests of NATO countries. Here, when you look at the map produced by the American general, talking about this multi-stress zone, and you pick up the Pentagon map of the war produced in the year 2005, you see that basically they can overlap each other. So now going back, okay, let's move to the idea of what is NATO CIMIC operation. Basically, as I said, the NATO CIMIC operation are inside the big umbrella of crisis management operation. They need operation. So how I developed this approach? First of all, I based my work on the NATO CIMIC doctrine, the definition of NATO civil cooperation, military function, the principle of CIMIC, and most important for us as anthropologists of security, the inputs of the CIMIC upland. Basically, all the knowledge we got in our mind, our experience, has to be put inside the inputs of the CIMIC upland. This is basically our job. Write down the CIMIC upland, operation plan. And after I was looking at the idea of Kilcullen, the accidental guerrilla, Kilcullen worked with General Petrus, who has a PhD in social anthropology, and Kilcullen advised him during the Afghan operation. I hope you can follow what I'm doing. So when we are talking about CIMIC, what we are talking about? First of all, CIMIC is a military function. It's a military function. This is an integral part of modern multinational operation which addresses all cooperating parties within a conflict situation and facilitate the mutual support of civilian capabilities to military forces and vice versa. The governing idea of CIMIC is reaching the defined and commonly desired end state for the best of the local population, the civil actors and the alliance, which will be, under the best of circumstances, hard to achieve. NATO CIMIC is the coordination and cooperation in support of the mission between the NATO commander and civil actors, including national population and local authorities, as well as international, national, and non-government organizations and agencies. You see, basically, that's for the first time, the military have to interact with a different kind of actors in the conflict or in the post-conflict area. So, principle of CIMIC. First of all, and this is the most important, is to understand the context and environmental awareness. First, the cultural context. Military operations now take place within a wider political and civil context than before, and commanders are increasingly required to take account of social, political, cultural, religious, economic, environmental, and humanitarian factors when planning and conducting operations. You see here the language is come from the terminology from critical security studies. So basically, it's like a copy of what Busan and the Copenhagen School were writing. And the present operational environment is likely to be complex and stable and, most important, unpredictable. Military success is based on this CIMIC operation. Therefore, CIMIC plays a vital role as one of the major advisors to the commander and ensuring mission-relevant cultural competence of the forces through education and training. A prerequisite is to be settled firmly into one's own cultural identity by knowing its principle and having understood its mechanism. Without the knowledge, the identification of difference will be impossible. It's not me, but it's the NATO manual. So, when we have to write down the input for the main operation plan, the one we have to present to the commander, okay, what we have to look at, and this is from the manual. First, more important, the political and cultural history, including tribal matters, the needs of population, the mindset and perception of the civil population, and something which I add, and it's come from a personal experience, is the important because this area is open. What the diaspora around the world, okay, they interact with this area where there was a conflict. With the diaspora, okay, they have always contact. Now, in this world where internet, we can have a communication in 1 second from different parts of the world, okay, the place where all these media, they operate, okay, is open, or as Marco de Roger used to say, contemporaries. So they are living the same time. So even if the idea of the diaspora is very important. So the inputs, when we have a look at this map, is very interesting. So basically, the military enter in what is called an anthropological place, for anthropology, which is a place intensely symbolized, lived by individuals in which they found a special, temporal, individual, and collective benchmarks. For the anthropologists, it is a space in which you can read and decode the social relation and the common forms of belonging. Based on my experience, I call this place as the traumatized anthropological place. First of all, war has demonize people. So when you are an anthropologist or a media, you go there, it's like you enter, you want to do research, let's say, inside the swimming pool. Okay, I want to see how people, now I'm calling from Spain, how the people, they live, they experience a swimming pool. So the big difference for anthropology is when you enter in a swimming pool in a normal time, with a normal water, with a normal temperature, or when you enter in a swimming pool where the water is boiling. How people react. This is basically what's happened in a conflict area or in a society living in a conflict area or in a post-conflict area. So the first word, the people has been dehumanized. Second one, we never have to forget this war is a big business for a lot of people. There are people who are not interested to arrive to a peace agreement, okay? Even if some organization. And after when we talk, okay, the people inside this traumatized anthropological place, the rich, the poor, you know, this conflict, the rich, they have access, I use the Rifkin definition, to other world. They escape, they have a bank account abroad, they study abroad, so they have all their connections. So the moment there is some crisis, they escape. They are in Saint-Tropez, they are in Monte Carlo. I was in Monte Carlo in Christmas time, and I can say this, you see people coming from conflicting area, enjoying champagne and everything in Monte Carlo. But the poor, they stay. So the poor, they stay. And this is another big interesting problem, because when you are an anthropologist wearing a uniform or dealing with military forces, a work for, let's say, in the case, the Italian army, a lot of time you deal with poor people, but the intermediary between you and the local people, basically the poor, which are, even if intellectually poor, because they don't know foreign language, a lot of time you have to need the help of a translator, someone who speaks your language. And most of the time, these translators, they come from the rich, the ruling, the people with access. And sometimes, a lot of time, you think that translating what you are saying, but basically they carry on a kind of business. The rich, the elite, will always want to maintain a status quo, even if in a post-conflict area. When we talk about emotion, what kind of emotion? Never forget, NATO has to win the war narrative. In this case, we have social emotion, okay, and individual emotion. The people, they live with feelings, trauma, sorrow, fear, the presence of death. The people, the local people, is disoriented local people. They are losing or they lost the reference points, and they live in the anxiety of absence. The people, they live in a collective paranoia. The importance of the suspect in paranoia is very, very important. There is a violence and structural violence. It's a territory where you can't dream. There is no future, okay? There is not a becoming. How you see yourself in Gaza in 10 years' time? How you see yourself in, let's say, Ukraine in 10 years' time? How you dream? Okay. So, how people, so basically people want to survive. When you go there as an anthropology, you listen to the people, you have to listen to them. And what is the language they use? It's the language of emotion, it's the language of trauma. And after you ask, starting ask, what is the truth? So before the conflict, there was an old truth. After the conflict, this is the construction of the new truth. And often, basically, we are always in the presence of what is called by a Croatian writer, the culture of lies. So basically, the last point to me is what represents the most important things anthropologists can do is to understand the zeitgeist of the traumatized anthropological place. I hope this is clear. Let's move it. So when we talk about NATO in the anthropological space, civil cooperation, there are two approaches. The first one developed by Kilcullen, that's the guerrilla, and the second one developed by the NATO multinational civil group, which is based in Italy, based on the idea of the listen, influence, interact. David Cullen, I suggest you to read his book, that's the guerrilla. Basically, he talks about the conflict ethnography. This conflict ethnography the main purpose is to win a war, win a war. His approach is a biomedical approach, okay? It basically, you see the body, the people, which the local people that can be influenced or be contaminated by a disease. Okay, so the guerrilla is like an infection. There is a contagion, intervention, injection. So basically, is interested in using a philosophical approach. When I talk to body, I put body and mind. Basically, is more referring to a kind of organism, which I defined, and I saw this approach a little bit limited, okay? It's not so comprehensive of what is of use of anthropologists in conflict, because I see the results in different areas like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and so on and so on. The Italian, excuse me, approach has been a little bit different, and it's called the Ulysses paradigm of CIMIC, basically on listen, influence, interact. But basically is based on listen, listen to listen to listen. People talk about themselves. A lot of time working as anthropologists, you think if you're working like a psychoanalyst, because basically you spend a lot of time to listen to the people. And the people, they talk about their perception of reality, how they feel the reality, how they see themselves in this reality. And your job is to pass all this data to your commander to explain what is there, what is going on. Always never forget there is a big difference between the map and the territory. So basically we are describing, because we are living in the territory. This is our job. So definition, the most important concept for us as anthropologists is the definition of culture. These are different idea or different definition of culture. The total way of life of a people, the social legacy, the individual acquires from his group. So you can read all of them. Yep. I like this idea of a behavioral map or a matrix in which we live. When you look at the big cities right now around the world, 80% of the world population now live in big cities. Even if here in Murcia, this behavioral map or matrix is present in Murcia too. So we have an area where the majority population is Spanish. So there you have a kind of behavioral map, a matrix. And after there are other areas where there are people coming from different cultural background nationally, where there is a different behavioral map and matrix. Let's go. Culture and doing ethnography and doing CIMIC. So for gears, I like to use gears. I don't know if you agree with me. Culture is an historical transmitted patterns of meanings embodied in symbols, a systemic of inherited conception, expressed in symbolic forms by means of which men communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and their attitudes toward life. Doing ethnography basically is like reading a text. It's sorting out the structural signification and determining the social group and import. So a CIMIC operation became a text. So for Gifford, the man is an interpretive in search of a meaning. Culture is public because the meaning is public. Symbols are not to be studied to gain access to mental process, but as formation of social phenomena. Culture is a context in which people live out their lives. So these are the assessment of the production of literacy knowledge. They part us to identify the local cultural framework. In NATO they call about cultural awareness, honor and faith, hierarchy, social stratification, purity, danger, taboo. proxemics and body language, speech at, worldwide, and belief system value present in the area. So the acquisition of cultural awareness, cultural linguistic competence, intercultural communication, multicultural mind are a must in order to be able to produce analysis at macro, meso, and macro level, to info collection, to establish interpersonal local relationship, to be able to see, or more precisely to observe, to be able to understand the local cultural model, the local social representation, and the local atmospheric. This is basically the paradigm of cultural model, the one you have to become aware for your work, and when you are there to find all these categories, how you put things that you observe in different categories, how you define them. This is a very important concept, is the concept of social representation, which is a system of value, idea, and practices. So you have to look around as social life, everyday life. What is the meaning? Because in every social day life, there's a kind of representation. And I refer, okay, you are the part of sociology to government, which I love it, okay? So through the social representation, you see it's a kind of to establish an order, and basically you communicate through representation. Someone say, even if the idea of to stage yourself, you stage your identity. Conclude thought, because we have 9 minutes left, the dangers and the need to understand and the production of legitimate security knowledge. The dangers, it is in the space of local cultural model social representation in which the simic operation takes place. So first we have to be careful with the idea of rumors. Rumors are spread. If you are familiar with the origin of ethnic conflict, most of the time ethnic conflict, they start with rumors, gossip, okay. Second one is important to understand the lull, the temporary pause of decline of activity. In this space, where basically you go to operate, takes place a psychological regression, which can happen. And it is very interesting because in a normal time, the relationship between the human beings, the population, the people, and the political leader is a normal relationship. The moment the community is under a security attack or military attack, or I don't know what, okay, the relationship between the local population and the leader change. And of course, the leader use all this cultural, symbolic, capital, and everything to construct his own narrative and construct his own security approach idea. The relationship between the local population and the political leader change and became a blind trust. People believe everything the political leader is saying. So, therefore, in this environment, it's important to understand the idea of the interpellation process, how people are interpellated and how emotions are triggered, okay? And all the messages in this space are culturally located. So, the need to understand and the production of legitimate security knowledge. Simic operation contribute to produce legitimate security knowledge. The legitimate security knowledge has to be used at tactical, strategical, political level. Therefore, we have first to look at the multiple threat zone through the paradigm of the space of virtual peace, the adoption of listen, influence, interact approach, and never forget that this space is a traumatized anthropological place. We need simic multipersonal who has multicultural mind. In the space theater of simic operation, the interaction between the simic multipersonal and the local population produce new meanings, new cultural models. And we have to adopt an anthropology of security vision. I conclude my presentation in time. So I don't know if you are happy. I don't know if you were able to follow me because there were many idea, concept, and category which I develop. Normally, a presentation like that is a work of 1 week or a seminar for 3 days in in a simic environment. Hi, Pablo.
Hi, thank you. Well, I'm kind of in full outside street gear because heading to our Senate. Again, let me express my gratitude. It's been fantastic presentation. I enjoyed every moment of it. And, you know, it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect dovetail lock with our master's program, social data analytics, and our PhD program, because you've been talking about methodology, research methodology, knowledge production, knowledge acquisition, research techniques. This is the stuff we really desperately need to inculcate into minds, into inquisitive minds of our students enrolled into all our programs, but into these advanced research-oriented programs like masters in analytics, social analytics, and the PhD program in sociology in particular. So thanks. I've enjoyed it greatly, and I'm sure that all the attendees will benefit greatly from your presentation, from your learning, which you so generously have shared with us. So many thanks.
So, Pablo, see you tomorrow.
Yep.
At the same
Can't
time
wait.
for the second part.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you for you
And
opportunity.
thank you. And maybe tomorrow people will be asking questions.
Yeah, because there might be 2 presentations about fieldwork.
Okay, great, fantastic.
Ciao.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day, and see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Ciao, Pablo. Thank you so much. Ciao.